What we really need to do is fix the real problem, which is excessive spending. We need major cuts ultimately to entitlement programs, Social Security and Medicare, major reforms there, and less spending over time. Just grow the budget by about 1%, have more economic growth. We can close this deficit within about 6 to 8 years. Hello. Welcome again to this week's economy. I'm your host, Dr. Vance Ginn. Thank you for joining me again today. We've got a lot to go through. It's coming up this week and what's been happening here recently. So let's get right to it. Number one, improve patient care, not the system. In the news, there has been much conversation on health policy in this election. However, Vance said at a recent interview, Trump's plan would mainly be deregulating the insurance market. Meanwhile, a new report predicts U.S. employers will see health insurance costs to rise an average of 5.8% in 2025. This is the third consecutive year in which healthcare costs for employers have risen more than 5%. Look, my take is on this is that the employer-sponsored health insurance costs have risen 50% since 2017 due to inflation, rising drug costs, chronic illness treatment, and regulations. This system limits competition and inflates prices. We don't have a system that's based on supply and demand in the marketplace. We really have a government-driven socialist healthcare system already in America. 65 million Americans rely on employer-sponsored insurance, but it restricts choices. It controls $1.2 trillion in healthcare spending that employees could use directly or put into HSAs for workers to control. My solution really here is look, there's not solutions, there's only trade-offs, but Congress should, instead of giving tax breaks to employers that makes it less portable, you're stuck to your job and everything else, is instead think about giving those tax breaks to employees if we're going to have them. Allow individuals to put more of that money into health savings accounts, take off those caps and shop then for their own care, driving competition, improving quality of care, and lowering cost. We need some market fundamentals and competition in the healthcare space, not more government intervention and less supply and more demand and other sort of things that are going to make the system worse. Remember, there's not a right to healthcare. There's a right to purchase healthcare, but nothing is free, including healthcare. So remember that. So in number two, Texas property tax relief hearing. In the news, the House Ways and Means Committee will meet jointly with the Select Study Committee on Sustainable Property Tax Relief to hear invited public testimony on property tax relief. One of the topics in particular is the review of the impact of this past session's bills on achieving the goal of providing sustainable property tax relief for Texas property owners. They will also evaluate whether Texas economic performance and state tax revenue support further compression of school district rates. My perspective on this is that there has been some improvements to the growth rate of property taxes over the last decade. And if you look at the last year worth of data from 2023, there's some slight discrepancies about whether or not it's a slight decrease or a slight increase, but it's not much given that there was $12.7 billion of taxpayer money that was sent to schools by raising the homestead exemption from $40,000 to $100,000 and compressing or reducing the school M&O property tax rate by 10.7 cents. Those could be good in nature, but they only reduced the school district property taxes by about $4.3 billion instead of the 12.7, so only about a third. And then total property taxes, if you include cities, counties, and special purpose districts, didn't really change much, if at all. And so this is not a good return on investment, if you will, of these dollars. Instead, they should have put it all towards compression. They should freeze school property taxes entirely and also make all the other property taxes of the entities not go above the no new revenue rate. And if they want to go above that, meaning increase property taxes $1, they should go to the taxpayer. Look, the state can't just raise its sales tax rate anytime it wants. Why should local governments be able to raise their property taxes anytime they want? We need a spending limit built at the state level and the local level, kind of like Colorado's Taxpayer Bill of Rights, that will restrain government spending at every level and then put in place some safeguards for property taxes not to go up too high, because eventually what we need to do is use surplus dollars at the state level to reduce the school and property taxes to zero, and then allow for cities and counties and special purpose districts to limit their spending and use surpluses to reduce their own property taxes to zero. And then we can eliminate property taxes in Texas. That would be a huge juggernaut for the economy of Texas, which is the 8th largest economy in the world. More on that here to come soon, but please be sure to check out in the show notes page as well. Number 3, More presidential candidate tax giveaways. In the news, in another tax giveaway to earn votes, President Trump targets a narrow sector of the economy, overtime workers. He promises to exempt overtime wages from federal taxes. Both Trump and Harris have promised similar tax exemptions for income, such as tips and Social Security, or tax expenditures like the child tax credit. My perspective on this is that we need to stop narrowing the tax base. We need the broadest base possible, so that way we're not picking winners and losers, which are forms of populism and lead to bad tax policy, which is going to lead us down the further road to serfdom, to socialism. That's not what we need to compensate for deficits and everything else. We also need to extend the Trump tax cuts and reform them, making them even simpler than what they are now. Ultimately, getting to a flat income tax rate would be ideal within the current system. And we also need to think about not getting rid of, not continuing to add into tax exemptions and everything else, but remove burdensome regulations like the Department of Labor's overtime rules. That would help out those overtime workers a lot, which limit job opportunities. And we also need to reduce taxes, regulations, and government spending. We've got to hear more about government spending because that's really the big problem here. Number 4, Trump wants higher taxes through tariffs. In the news, Trump has proposed a 20% tariff on all imports and an additional 60 to 100% tariff on goods from China. In response, Kamala Harris has called Trump's proposal a 20% sales tax. Well, they're all going back and forth is my take on who can have different policies, more giveaways, more handouts, but they're also willing to raise taxes. Kamala Harris is raising taxes on a lot of people too, just like Trump is trying to raise taxes on all of us from raising tariffs. Because remember, that does hit us. So all this would do is this 20% hike on imports would raise a lot of the prices that we pay. It also raise prices that businesses pay for their intermediate goods and lead to distortions throughout the economy. I've talked about this several times. I have a recent piece at the American Institute for Economic Research that you should go check out on tariffs, how they're a bad idea. We need to get away from protectionism. We need to get towards free trade and allowing for lower corporate income taxes and other taxes that will make us more competitive. So more production will be done here domestically. But we've also got to understand that whenever you have trade, you're also benefiting those across the globe to buy more of our goods and services at the same time. Why shouldn't we want prosperity for everyone, not just a select few? And we're only 330 million people in Texas, in the United States, 30 million in Texas, but we're about over 7 billion across the globe. So if we're not helping others and others are benefiting from that, we're going to have much less prosperity. And my goal is to let people prosper, right? And so I want prosperity for everyone, not just those that are in America. I think we will prosper. I know we will, as more people are prospering across the globe. So let's get back to those types of better solutions here. Number 5, will Congress pass a spending bill? In the news, federal government funding expires on September 30th. To avoid a shutdown, Congress must pass a new spending bill. Republican efforts to include a proposal that requires proof of citizenship for voters registration has derailed the progress of the previous bill and might this time as well. A government shutdown this close to an election would be costly, and also it's just ridiculous how they can't get their act together. My take is that we've got a spending issue. We've got too much government spending that's going on that's leading to deficits, inflation, higher prices, and weaker dollar. When the government spends beyond its means and runs deficits, the Federal Reserve prints more money to pay for that, to keep interest rates from going up. And so that's creating other problems. It also makes it more difficult for the Fed, who recently met and made their decisions, right, to do their job of controlling inflation and their money supply and everything else. What we really need to do is fix the real problem, which is excessive spending. We need major cuts ultimately to entitlement programs, Social Security and Medicare, major reforms there, and less spending over time, which I've noted in my Let Americans Prosper project. We're just grow the budget by about 1%, have more economic growth. We can close this deficit within about 6 to 8 years. We don't need a lot longer than that. You don't even need necessarily major cuts. We just got to slow the growth rate of spending, because that's the major problem. It's one reason why I've called for a federal spending limit based on a maximum of population growth plus inflation, but really it should be closer to 1%. We could do a lot better there, or even cutting the budget. Come on. There's a lot of waste that we're spending money on each and every day. Number 6, Texas overfunds public education. In the news, I corrected an inaccurate data recently regarding my previous This Week's Economy episode and other things that I have made on social media posts on the amount of of funding for public education in Texas based on feedback from a state representative. It was an honest mistake I learned from, and I apologized and made corrections on social media, and so I'm doing so here as well. But this error doesn't negate that we are overfunding the monopoly government school system and getting flat or declining student outcomes. Essentially, what I said is that instead of showing a 12.6, I think it was, percent decline in per student funding over time, or funding for the public school system in Texas, I showed that there was about a 12% increase. I had mixed up one of the cells, and so basically my numbers were wrong. I admitted that, I corrected it, but really, if you adjust it with the average daily attendance and inflation correctly, it's a 4.7% decline over the last decade, basically since 2016. And so, given that information, I was like, look, here's what's going on, but we still have declines in student performance. And if you go a little bit further back, from 2014 to 15 biennium to the 22-23 biennium, total education spending surged 53% to $92.4 billion, while per student spending jumped 45% to $16,792. So this is for those school years. That's far above inflation's 28.6% increase. Yet 76% of eighth graders are below proficiency in math, and 75% of them are below proficiency in reading. That is not a good situation. That means only about a quarter of the students in eighth grade are at or above proficiency levels, meeting those grade levels in reading and math. That's horrible, right? The problem is underfunding, but overfunding and inefficiency in Texas government-run monopoly education system. There's no competition or incentives to improve outcomes. Instead, we need to empower, teachers and parents and students and taxpayers through education savings accounts, through universal school choice, where we allocate about $12,000 per student through ESAs. We reduce the cost of education per year from $92.4 billion for 5.5 million students to $75.6 billion for 6.3 million school-aged children, saving taxpayers at least $16.8 billion. The savings should be used to reduce school district property taxes and school debt, further relieving taxpayers. This is the way that goes on. Look, I'm sorry I made this mistake. Honest mistake overall. Had to correct it. I think we need more of this civil discourse. I've gotten beat up some on Twitter and other things. I get it. I made a mistake, so they're going to do that. But I want to make sure that what I'm coming from are factual evidence of what's happening and what the numbers are. And that's what you're going to get from me each and every week. So I hope you'll keep listening and share with your friends and family. So thank you again for joining me in this episode of This Week's Economy. For more insights, visit vanceginn.com and get a paid subscription to my new Substack newsletter at vanceginn.substack.com today, so you receive these insights in your inbox every time they come out. So God bless you, and let people prosper.